This is Anchorman's AI journey. Tune in to get inspired by the opportunities, impact and capabilities of data, machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Well, good morning everyone. I'm Peter Paul. I'll be your host for this session. I work for Anchorman and have the honor of guiding you to the first AI Journey podcast session of the new year, 2021. And the podcast, as you might know, is revolving around the opportunities, the challenges, and also the trending developments with data in the manufacturing and manufacturing services industries. Today, we will zoom in on the creation and also the manufacturing industries. The suppliers that they have that also create something and the customers that these manufacturers serve themselves. So if you look at the playing field of the global industrial giants, the not-so-global industrial giants, or even the more local manufacturers, their challenges revolve around reducing complexity of their production facilities, their supply chain, their maintenance, repair and operations, their spare parts supply, and of course the procurement and tendering of all this stuff. So how can data make their life more easy, reduce complexity and help find, for instance, spare parts and even save money? Well, to discuss this, luckily I'm not on myself or on my own. I'm happy to be joined by two experts actually in the field of data, and well, let's call it MRO domain. Let me introduce them to you. Welcome, Laurent Chavagne, our first esteemed guest. Laurent started out his career in an adventurous way as a sailor on a motor ship for almost 2 years. He rolled into the world of sales, and since 1996, so almost 25 years of experience, his work domain is all about procurement and supply chain. In the more recent years also combined with the benefits of using data in these domains. His latest achievement encompasses his overall experience, his skill and his drive to innovate. And combined with the insights of the potential of e-business, e-commerce and big data, he transformed one of his former employers, Mac45, which is the old Philips warehouse business, to become a digital and e-commerce business-to-business frontrunner. He currently holds a position as a director of European procurement at IESA, which is a large business process outsourcing company. And in his scarce spare time, Laurent is also a keen collector and seller of rare books, prints and drawings. Welcome, Laurent. Happy to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. The other guest, of course, is my esteemed colleague, Benno de Jager.
Hello.
Hello. Good to have you. After finishing his technical studies in 2000, Benno joined companies like Ordina and Logica CMG, where he shaped his technical data and data architectural skills. He grew his experience in the data domain in a mix of commercial and governmental organizations before ending up, luckily, at Anchorman, where he became one of the masterminds for domain-specific solutions around MRO for the manufacturing and manufacturing services industry. Benno helps his customers making the most of their data challenges from a solution architect point of view, but he's also not afraid to make his hands dirty by deep diving into solution and code. Benno loves to get out in the open and run half marathons for fun. How about that? Welcome, Benno.
Hello, Peter Paul.
Hi. Good guys, good. Nice to have you here. Let's talk about well, in my experience at least, a part of the industry that is hardly ever connected to the usage of data, which is the manufacturing industry, for instance, and also more specific, the supply chain and procurement departments in these companies. Laurent, since you are the guest of honor and also one of the experienced guys in this domain, so procurement and supply chain logistics, can you introduce us a bit into the world of this? Because as a historian, I'm obviously interested in what happened in the past, what we can learn from that, and how we can use this knowledge to understand why we are now and where we are now. So can you help us understand, in your opinion, how the world of supply chain and procurement evolved with regard to the use of data in the last, let's say, 20 years?
Okay. Well, it didn't very much, and that's more or less the problem.
Okay.
You see, production has become complex, more and more complex over the years. What started out with quite simple machines and quite concentrated productions has become incredibly varied with all modern machines that keep following each other up. And it has led to a very complex supply chain with literally thousands of suppliers, literally supplying millions of parts. And everybody in manufacturing has been concentrating on the technique. And when I'm talking about technique, it's not so much digital technique. Mm-hmm. What they've been concentrating on is better bearings, better switches. If it gets digital, it's about PLCs, registering machine movements, etc. But not so much about the data, about the products that actually are used to make something.
Yeah.
And that is the complexity. It has been treated as a nuisance, something you need to do to some extent because you can't buy it if you don't register something. But whenever you look at data from I've seen hundreds of companies in this field, and I've seen their ERP data. You see everybody working towards getting the product in the system, so doing the least possible that you can in order to get the transaction done, and that's it.
So just the registration of the parts, for instance, that we're talking about now, and they don't do anything with the data that's part of these parts as well.
They don't do anything with the data, and that also makes it later on. It makes it very difficult to do more complex actions, like, for instance, if you want to work on predictive maintenance. How are you going to predict which part to exchange if you don't even know which part is in there?
Well, makes sense.
And sometimes you know the one major part, but there's always a lot of little stuff around it. And if it's not registered, you don't know it. You can't do anything with it. And that is now also where this problem becomes bigger, because if you want to make the next step, you have to do things to get your data in order, to get your product data in order. So far, it was just something where you had to deal with it, and that was the only reason they did. But it was never a goal to deal with it in a very correct and productive manner. Now, there have been companies that did it in the past. You mentioned Philips. Philips is a company that worked very early on registering. But in the old-fashioned way it was done back then, well, it was modern back then. Let's give them credit there. That doesn't have the kind of flexibility that you would need today in order to really use that data.
So if I understand you correctly, actually you're saying in the past, the companies that procured stuff to supply chain their own production facilities or to their end customers who were needing spare parts, for instance, to maintain their machines, they were just procured. They were registered somewhere in the system, in a system, probably a procurement system or a supply chain kind of software solution. I'm not sure. But and that was it. So that's where it ended.
It didn't become interesting until they had web shops, and they had to sell something in web shops. Then the trading companies started registering stuff. But before that, it wasn't done.
But also, if you hear at this story and we talk about an organization, and in one sentence you mention different stakeholders, different persons with different concerns and benefits. And I think that's part of the complexity, because we talk about an organization who's making parts, of making stuff and using parts, and therefore needs spare parts in order to keep the factory running. But there are a lot of different stakeholders concerned with from different viewpoints, and they use different systems, and they have different benefits, where the supply chain is responsible for keeping the factory running. Procurement is responsible for buying the spare parts that are needed. They come from a completely different viewpoint and have different needs when it comes to data, and also have different activities when it comes to data.
But in your opinion, guys, what would be the because it makes sense what you're saying, but on the other hand, as a simple layman, I would say, okay, apparently there was no business case or a use case for these departments like procurement and supply chain to actually get more out of the data. In the end, there's no legislation for that, like financial institutions had to do or e-commerce shops had to do. Why, in your opinion, that's actually my question, are these industries not the front runners? What's happened? Why did they leave it at the table that long?
It's complex. It's very complex with a lot of different players. Again, as Rijn Benno said, with a lot of stakeholders. So procurement wants to concentrate the procurement in the least possible suppliers, on the least possible products. Technicians just want the stuff now. when they need it. And they don't care where it comes from because they have a maintenance request. So that already makes it complex. And for companies overall, MRO consists of just a very, very small part of their overall cost. It's 2-3% of their overall cost.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's not like the marketing budget of some companies that can run into 20-30%. If you save a little bit on that, you're making money.
Okay.
And what also the kind of digital revolution, the possibilities that we have nowadays are fast more helpful than they were before. Like in the early days, in the old days, we didn't even have digitization, but then we had a digital transformation and companies, organizations, factories, plants, they all became more and more digitized and they did it all by digitalization of the process they are running. So the supply chain, the manufacturing part is digitalized by using PLCs, by computers, by robots doing the operation to create products.
PLC, help me out on that one.
A controller, a programmable controller, of the robot steering the manufacturing.
Okay.
But so then also the possibilities emerged and we went from just the old-fashioned ERP systems to now the more serverless, microservices, big data tooling, even though if you don't have big data, you can still use the tooling and the possibilities that come out of that.
Yeah.
It's also one of the reasons why it wasn't managed. ERP systems are not sophisticated enough. You can't get the data in that you need to get in.
And you're referring to SAP and JD Edwards at this point?
All of them, None of them can be really used as a database for your spare part management. Transactionally fine, stock-wise fine, but not to actually register what is this part exactly. Then you have, of course, PIM systems, but they are mainly set up to sell something in a web shop.
Yeah.
They also lack a lot of the important information.
Yeah.
So there was nothing there.
Okay, right.
And what they were using, like the ERP systems, you see that if a company or an organization consists of several production plants and they have a head office, then administrations are diverse. They use different administrations at different places, all creating their own data and their own world of data.
And I guess also the merger of companies has to do with that. The one company acquires another one and also acquires the operational system that they are using and the software that goes with it and stuff like that.
It's not strange to see 4 or 5 different ERP systems in the same company operational. And then as Ryan Benner said, what you see often in industry is that maintenance, etc., is done in programs like Maximo, whereas all the transactions are done in something like SAP, and there is no link between the two.
All right, yeah.
But
that should be easy to solve nowadays, right? With all the data integration software that you can easily get off a shelf, or
but it's more than just data integration. If you look at the data, if it's administrated in different systems, then those systems often have their own data standards, and data standards are also changing because a system is going through an evolution as well. So the data is going through an evolution as well. So you have different data systems with different data standards, and if you want to integrate, where do you transform your data to? That's always a big issue in companies.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that in a minute. But Laurent, you just referred to the size of and the budget of the procurement and supply chain departments adds up to what did you say? 5%?
Well, the MRO procurement, that's 2-3% of average of a company in direct cost.
Yeah.
Now there is a much bigger cost, and that's production loss from not having the right parts. But it's virtually impossible to find any reliable data on it.
Yeah, I can see that.
People will only report on it if they can say, "Hey, we solved this one." But you never see anyone reporting.
But are you actually also implying or saying that solutions like this, like using this data, or the use case or even the business case out of this is only applicable to large companies? Or could this be beneficial to a company regardless of size?
It's like a lot of new solutions. In the beginning, it's only applicable to very large companies. Like in the past, ERP systems were only for multinationals. As costs come down and as it gets used more and more, you will see that it becomes applicable for more companies. Now, if you are a 3-person company making wooden furniture, I can imagine you can still manage that in an Excel. That you don't really need a big data solution for that.
Yeah.
But as soon as it becomes something more serious, then it becomes interesting to look at other solutions to manage this.
Yeah, and if you have more than one Excel, then you run into problems. You still don't need a large data solution, but you need insight over 2 Excels, and that's kind of the problem. I think it's about creating a data ecosystem, because around everything, all the data sources that you have in your organization.
And don't underestimate also the fact that we are talking about the kind of data that we want to register on a product right now. But that's a fraction of what we will need in the future. Because the amount of data, the number of data points, attributes that we need to add to a product, that grows every year almost. Every year there's some new code that needs to be added, or some new requirements, new certification, change certification. It's constantly growing. So if you come up with a solution, that's why the ERP systems don't work. It has to be flexible.
Yeah, makes sense. So they're actually too rigid and they're not data flexible enough to really provide insights. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing that is vastly underestimated in the industry is that many companies don't know exactly what is in their machine that is manufacturing a product. And they don't care as long as the machine works.
Keeps running, yeah.
But on the other hand, companies have to take more and more responsibility of what they are doing and the results of what they are doing. There will be a time when it's not acceptable anymore, that you can't prove that all those parts that are in there are correct and have been certified and have been. So in the future, you really need to know. Because there's going to be a time when you can't get away with it anymore.
No, I can see that. Yeah, because what would be, in your opinion, guys, the obstacle? What kind of problems could you run into then?
If your equipment, causes pollution, or especially in food industries. In food industries now you have a lot of products. If they come in direct contact with food, then people will think about it. But things that are more indirect, it's not always completely, top of mind that you have to be careful with that as well. In many industries, it's still quite rudimentary, the way they register all the certification, the way they register all the knowledge of what exactly is used where in the production process.
Okay, so you're actually saying that the knowledge of the machines that they are using is still the supplier of the machine and not at the user of the machine. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
And in the end, you're responsible because you're doing something with it.
For sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the problem you run into then is, of course, downtime in the factory. Because if a machine breaks down and you don't have the right spare part in time or on stock, because you don't know what spare part you have, or you're using, or you're needing, and you don't know what you have on stock.
That could be funny. Recently, we had a conversation with a manufacturer that apparently has warehouses full of stuff. Spare parts, but also manufacturing materials, and he didn't even know where the spare parts belong to.
The biggest category is the unknown category. So that's the insight in spare parts that you need and the spare parts that you have.
Okay.
So when you have multiple factories, multiple plants, like part sharing between plants is impossible. So you have the downtime in the factory, but you also have the management of the pile of stock of spare parts that you have, and then you have the part sharing between plants. Those are
it's a problem that multiplies. If you have one production site with one one set of machinery equipment and it's using spare parts, that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
But if you get 2 or 3, then the problem becomes exponentially more complex.
Yeah.
If you add countries and if different
language
digital
barriers,
systems, then you get to something that's almost impossible to comprehend. So, and that's when the decisions are made to outsource the problem to a wholesale company or an integrator to just manage it. We don't care anymore. But they too will have to digitize in some way their solution, or else they can't do it cheaper and better.
Yeah. That makes sense actually. The funny thing is, in my own experience, compelling or mandatory events like legislation or audits or a disaster that had occurred is usually the driver of innovation, or for companies has been, especially for instance in the financial services industry, with these financial crises that we had in 2008, and also this was a driver to be more transparent and also to make more usage of data and give clarity to A, the people, and B, the legislator.
Yeah.
So that was a really tipping point for this industry to become more like data-driven. That's clear. And for e-commerce, of course, it's also very obvious that every data that you have regarding your customers you can use it to your advantage as a company. How do you, in your opinion, guys, and in your experience, how do you see this? Where do you see this tipping point for the specific procurement supply chain kind of change, and also the maintenance, repair, and operations divisions for a company? When did this happen, this turnaround of seeing the benefit of using data?
There's one famous example, of course, is aviation. Before the 90s, people, there was no real strict registration of avionics and aviation spare parts. A couple of accidents happened because of parts that weren't suitable for their task. In the end, they came up with an investigation that turned out that even Air Force One contained a large part of non-licensed parts. Yeah. So that was one, the best guarded and the best maintained aeroplane in the world. And, it was not very reliable.
Oh, okay.
So, and that led to a standardization project where everything was registered. It led to this full traceability that they have in that industry. But it was done with the knowledge and with the capacities of the 90s, the early 90s. And that's limited. So it's very cumbersome and it's very expensive. If you buy a very simple screw that goes into an aeroplane, you're paying minimally $2 for that. Now, in normal industry, you wouldn't want to pay $2 for a simple screw or something like that. So it makes for a very expensive process. But that was an industry, and that was caused by accidents. Now, I hope that there will be enough people in the industry to not wait for an accident in pharma or food and in another industry before they actually decide we need to get this completely under control.
Yeah. And do you have any experience with this, Rambeno, when it comes to when you saw customers changing from the usual suspects within a company or a manufacturing company regarding the keeping of data and the usage of data, it also became savvy in the more traditional departments like procurement and supply chain? Is there a specific driver for that?
Specific driver, I don't know. But from a technology point of view, of course, the possibilities due to enhanced capabilities in the automation help to become an organization data-driven, and seeing the world changing around you and doing more and more with data, of course, gets you at a point to ask the question, can we do more with data as well?
Yeah.
Because we're solving a data issue for a business with a business problem. So if the business problem is a scattered supplier base and no scale utilization, then how can you update the supplier base and get that scale utilization that you want to achieve, and to be able to update or upgrade your process. I think that's the shift coming from manual processes to more digitization, digital processes, creating data, data-driven processes, and then also moving that to the factory and providing the possibilities to gain profit by using data.
It's actually one of the interesting things that you say here, because that's how I got interested in the newer techniques. You asked earlier, for who is this for? For big companies, or can it also be interesting for smaller companies? Now, if you really want to register all your product data, all your spare part product data, and you want to do that well, and you want to do that exhaustive, you need a lot of people. Now, that was something only big companies could afford in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And even for them, it was complex. As a problem owner in this field, that was also one of my problems. I didn't have the budget to hire 30 people and get all the data in order. I needed to figure out something better. That's when you start searching for solutions, and that's when I got into touch with Anchorman, and then you get introduced to the newer technologies that are there that allow you to do this without 30 people working full time, and that allow you to do this in a more flexible and creative way. And that also makes it now a solution that becomes available to smaller companies.
All right. So it's the ease of use is has grown in the maturity level. So it's easier to use. It's cheaper to implement. That's actually what you're saying.
Yeah. And
it's easier to access data or share data if of course, suppliers and manufacturers are open to that.
But it's easier to go from the raw data to accurate data. So we have more possibilities, more intelligence to mine the data out of because it's not like there is a lack of data.
No.
It's just quality is rubbish.
Yeah. Well, you need a good quality set for sure. Otherwise, you base all your insights on stuff
and also that the data is in silos.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data available, but all in their own silo.
Yeah.
And then so what you need to do is get it out, combine it, and make it accessible. And that's more or less the kind of solutions that you need to be working on right now.
Yeah.
And that's why, in order to do that, you have to move away from the old-fashioned, monolithic, big ERP kind of systems that are very rigid, and everything has adhered to that system if you want to use that system. And now with the new capabilities, it becomes much easier for us as a data tech company to create a platform, ingest the data, and handle it in a complete different way.
Yeah.
Away from the ERP, away from the rationalized approach.
Yeah. So, but in my opinion, a lot of companies, so perhaps even the manufacturing industry,
or relational approach as well.
Yeah. But are
going
already
to microservices.
already using. Well, please continue. Are already
Data
using
insight.
the amount of data that they have to combine it. Companies like the big ERP suppliers are claiming, I'm not sure whether this is true or not, but are claiming that they can combine every data that a company has. And
as long as you put the data in their system and you transform it to their data standard. And the data standardization is then a huge problem because it's all manual labor. So for a lot of organizations, they go from one data standard to another data standard. And then there comes a new data standard. And it's all manual transformation done by humans who have to...
Another year goes by without a new data standard.
Okay.
And it's usually the data standards that will, do away with all the other data standards.
Yep.
And then a year later you see, well, it was just one more on top of all the other ones.
Yeah. Okay, so it gets piled up and it doesn't become any more transparent or easier to use, I guess, yeah?
No.
Okay.
So there are some things that are slightly useful, but most of them, no.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's take that turn then for now. Laurent, you were telling you've been working for Mac 45. At a certain point, you've been working there, and you were thinking, you were sitting on your chair in your office, and were thinking, okay, we should be able to do this more easy or more advanced way using data.
Yeah.
What was this? What happened? What went through your mind? You were looking out the window and thinking, this is it. You know, what was the trigger for this?
Well, it wasn't really like that. It was a long slug trying to find the solution. Everybody always talks about the brilliant insights. I probably don't have the brains for that, because what I did was I had a problem, and that was that we onboarded new customers regularly, large industrial plants. They came up with tens of thousands of lines of products that they needed. None of them very well described usually. And it took a lot of manual labor. It took a lot of human effort to make, to code that and get it into our system and to actually understand what it all was. Thousands of mails going to and fro asking, but this field says it's a relay, and this field says it's a fuse. What is it? And
so the uniformization of actually the understanding of a spare part, for instance, or a part of a machine.
A lot of that information was in all kinds of description fields where it shouldn't be, and it was a lot of effort, and you needed to be really bright and know a lot about the parts in order to be even able to recognize them. So what I was doing, I was hiring very smart people to do very silly work. And that's not a recipe for engaging good people, because in the end they had to go line by line by line by line identifying products. That's ridiculous. So the only smart insight that I had at that time is that, but isn't this what automation was supposed to do for us? So you start looking at ways to automate it, and at that time all I could find was people having more or less PIM systems, relational databases that could solve the problem if you put a lot of work in it.
By PIM you mean product information?
Product information management systems, none of whom covered the vast field of what we did. Because one of the complexities is that at one stage, you will be supplying a simple screw or a bearing, but you will also be supplying electronic parts. Now, most of the things you want to know about a screw are quite irrelevant for a electronic part. And vice versa. You don't want to know how much volt the screw is.
They have a different function within this machine or system. That makes sense.
So most of those product information management systems, if you want to cover all that information, you blow them up to some huge thing, and there's a million things you need to register in a way, and a lot of them are not even relevant to a part. So that is a very difficult way to work. Having already disregarded several systems because they were simply not good enough. I got in touch with someone who told me that there could be better technology available right now. At that time, I think it was 2014 or something like that. It was still quite new to work with the non-relational database, but I have to be careful when I get to the digital field, because then Ryan Benno knows what he's talking about.
That's why you brought him in.
That's. But there were better ways to do it, and I know that I was really very skeptical about it, because that was just another IT guy telling me we have the solution. I had heard that one before and had dismissed them all. So, but this time it actually worked.
All right, because so you're actually saying it was easy to ingest the data, but it was a bit harder to correlate it to each other, because you might be speaking about the same spare part which comes from a different supplier, which is actually in basic the same, but they renamed it for their own purposes. Or how does this work?
Even ingesting it wasn't easy, because you pull the data out of an ERP system. In some cases, it's a huge amount of data. First thing you have is if every plant has their own way they structured it. and you have to figure that one out first. And then in all kinds of access databases, Excels, etc., people started working. Now the chance for error is huge. It's very cumbersome. And then in the end, you still have to prepare an upload into an ERP system and then hope that everything runs fine.
Yeah.
And that's not really the 21st century way of working, but for most companies, this is still how it's done.
Yeah. Okay, so actually, if it runs, it runs. That's a way to look at it. But your message would be like you can make way more out of that.
Yeah, if it runs, it runs. But if you want to optimize, then the optimization is limited to the boundaries of the systems you're using.
Okay.
And that's, together with Laurent, we came up with a solution. It's kind of a platform in which you can ingest data coming from any source you have. It might be a system, it might be Excel, it might be Access. Just deliver the data. It always starts with the data analysis, because you can't just take data from somewhere down here and put it in a solution without looking at what it is. So you try to place it in. You try to place it in the solution along with the context that it came from.
Yeah.
And if you do that, and no matter what the data standard is that was used, or the structure that it was administered in, or the language, another issue that it was described in, you can ingest it into our platform, and the platform will take the data, analyze the data, taking different methods, like we do engineering, but we also do data science.
Okay.
And then we analyze the data, and we get information. We retrieve information from the data. And based on the information we retrieve from the data ingested in the platform, we are able to create matches between the data on the information that we retrieved from it.
Okay, so you're actually saying if a company runs into issues with, for instance, spare parts, they cannot find it, they cannot match it, they don't know where it belongs to or where they got it, if they can buy it cheaper, stuff like that, the traditional systems cannot provide that.
No. And even the more modern systems rely on you putting all the information in there right now. And one problem that it doesn't solve, a very important one, is legacy data.
Right.
Because, factories have been running for years. Machines have been running for years.
Yeah, they're not fast-moving consumer goods, I can imagine. No.
And you're always limited to the boundaries of the system that you're in. And we work for companies, for clients having multiple ERP systems. Yeah, you can optimize within one ERP system, but if you want to know for your complete organization which spare parts are we using, where are we using them, where do we buy them, could we have bought them somewhere else?
Yeah. So you're suggesting
what are the characteristics of this part that I am using?
Yeah.
Then there is no overall insight, and that's what you want to have if you want to optimize. If you do, for example, tender support, or you want to manage your tail of suppliers, if you have more than 1,000...
You manage the tail of suppliers, the tail spend?
The tail spend,
okay,
yeah. Well, you buy stuff at suppliers, and different suppliers are selling the same product, but they try to sell it as a unique item, as a unique product.
Okay.
If you can have insight in what, in fact, is the
similar,
item that the supplier is selling, and that it might be the same another supplier is selling, then you have the choice to choose between two suppliers, or 3 or 4.
If you're a multinational,
this can add up. Yeah,
every
I can imagine this can add
has
up.
their own tail, and you can add them up.
Makes sense in a lot of ways, actually.
That's huge.
So in fact, you have a kind of ecosystem of data living in your organization, where your organization is the universe consisting of different ecosystems of data.
Yeah.
And you want to combine those and put an overall view on top of it and be able to gain benefits from that.
That's fine. So that's interesting. Given also the topic for today, so it's supply chain, procurement, MRO, stuff like that. Let's zoom in, guys. Yeah. If we zoom in on this, what are the typical issues that these departments run into then, if they want to collect this data? What's stopping them from doing so right now?
They don't know it, and they have an ordering number. You know, the procurement organization needs to procure. So, and they have a number somewhere that the supplier understands, and you send it to the supplier, and you get that stuff in. And that's that. Mm-hmm. And if you're working in procurement, MRO is you know, it's very few people go into procurement with a burning desire to end up in MRO.
So you're actually saying there are no passionate procurement people, by heart. Okay.
Yeah, it's also a kind of tunnel vision. When you are in the procurement department of a factory, then you're responsible getting the parts procured for that factory. Yeah. You don't necessarily, often never, look beyond the boundaries of that factory. So it's not only the silo of the systems, but it's also the silos in the organizational departments.
Yeah, I can see. But are we talking about not knowing the unknown, or are we talking about the lack of ambition to become better?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, a lot is not known, and again, there's different interest. You know, if I'm an engineer and I'm responsible to keep some stuff running, I prefer to have my supplier around the corner. I don't care how much he charges for it, as long as it's always there when I need it. Yeah. And I don't care on how to register it, as long as that guy knows, or girl, whoever, knows what to send me when I call them. That's all I care about as the maintenance manager. Now, in procurement, of course, this is a horror. Because you're not in control. You're buying stuff, you're spending money, and you don't really know what it's on. And then, and you know, you have to either get it under control, but you're very dependent on this maintenance guy, because the maintenance person will say, well, whatever, but it must, you know, I don't want to lose efficiency, I don't want to lose speed, and I don't want to lose quality. So,
their main task would be to prevent the machine from stopping production, I guess, right?
But I mean, that's their task. And then procurement says, but what is it exactly? Well, I don't have time to tell you all that. You figure it out. And then the procurement guy has to report to finance. Now, the one thing you should never tell finance is that you spent money and you don't really know what it's all about. So, you know, there you have to cloak the problem, or else, you know, you're going to have some very nasty meetings with your management. So it is a problem, and it's actually, for many companies, it's quite important to hide the problem, just to make sure that you don't get into trouble.
Makes sense. So what?
And if a profit has its own profit and loss commitment, then why would you look beyond the boundaries?
And as a procurement person, I mean, they already bumped you down to MRO. You're not going to report problems. You know, the next bump might be out, because it's not the most sexy part that you can get in this profession.
Yeah, it's something that's being solved traditionally in the shades, and it's like running water from a tap. You expect it to be there. Yeah. And if it's not there, somebody head's rolling, you know?
And it's also the road of least resistance, of course. If you buy a machine, then the company that sold it to you will tell you, this is the list of spare parts that you need, and you can buy it at my place. So you end up buying a machine and a bunch of spare parts you might never use, but you might also have had them on stock already, or you might also be able to buy them somewhere else.
Assuming that people from the MRO department or supply chain or procurement are listening, so where can they start? You know, perhaps a lot of people recognize this situation. They are they're using a system that is actually providing you with information regarding spare parts, or the way they procure stuff, or the price list, or the manufacturer of this specific part, and also the number that they might need in the future. Where can they? And they of course have limited budgets, and their only KPI, for instance, is to buy stuff as cheap as possible. Now you can go to your store around the corner, Laurent, as you just mentioned, and start bargaining with this person. But that's a bad point of view, I guess, if you have only one supplier, right?
Or you could go to a bigger supplier, but they might be further away, and you need to, you know, and then you get some lead time issues, and then you get trouble with your side. You know, I think my tip is first, don't fear the complexity of it, because it is really daunting. If you get the complete list, if you have a decent production facility and you look at the complete list of suppliers and you look at the complete list of parts that is used there, it's easy to simply give up and say, well, we're never going to get on top of this one. But don't fear it. There are solutions right now for that, so we can start working on that now.
Okay, cool. And Rembeno, did you experience at a certain point you were thinking inside Ankerman, like, okay, we've heard several of these. We talked to customers, and first we did e-commerce for them, and then we did some other stuff for them, and we predicted their churn or their website visits. But also there are manufacturing companies that run into. What triggered you to think of a solution for these MRO kind of issues or challenges that companies have?
I guess now you're making this assumption that I was triggered and created the solution, but then I have to hand it over to Laurent, because it wasn't me signaling that problem in the MRO world. I teamed up with Laurent after we said there is a problem we can solve there are problems we can solve in the domain of MRO, and coming from a engineering background, software development background, I always tend to think in generic solutions for reoccurring problems. And so I, of course, jumped on board very quickly to see if we can help building something generic that can help multiple people facing the same problem.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, and if you try to answer this question, then thanks for your honesty, Rembeno. It's at least you're not a vain person. But what's for you? We asked it before, but dive into that a bit deeper, and if you can, what issues did it solve for you at the Mach 45 time? I guess at that time.
At that time, one of the issues it did solve that we got in control over our data, and we had, I think at that moment we had 7,000 or 8,000 suppliers. We had close to 1 million products that we knew. When I left there, we had about 15 million registered parts from 15,000 suppliers, and we were having less trouble with data than we had before that.
Oh, wow.
So that it did solve for us. What it also solved for us was that the onboarding of a new customer and getting everything completely under control used to take quite a long time. We slashed that time to a quarter of the time that we needed before. So those are really useful things, because we couldn't grow in the number of people doing that work, but we could grow as a company 4 times faster than we could before.
Because you were in control of this data.
Yeah. And that is what it solved. And then later on, when
so what steps did you take to get to that point? What were the steps that for instance, Rembeno could help you with from the data side of things? And I guess you added from your role as within Mach 45, you added your domain knowledge or subject matter expert.
What we did very much is, because as I was referring earlier to the Excels and to the accesses, etc., all the good people in sourcing have a million tricks on how to find the same parts, or how to find certain specific parts or sections. Now, what we did eventually was, first, they had the solutions to store all that data, because that was a problem as well.
Yeah.
Now, that was number one. Then number two, all those tricks of the trade were simply digitized. And instead of a person, working on this manually. That seems
very hard, Laurent. You have to get people out of knowledge out of people's heads, I guess.
Yeah.
The trick of the trade, you name this.
Yeah.
But how can you put it into a digital system then?
Yeah, but it also
that's where that comes in.
Okay.
Bring it in.
Oh yeah, no, but
take it away.
No. It's not that. My answer to your question to Laurent is it's all in Laurent's head, and that's what we did. The question was, how can we handle the huge amount and great diversity of MRO data that we just have been talking for almost an hour about. And then for me, as a solution architect, I tend to think in generic solutions to the problem I hear, repetitive solutions. And then looking at what we do at Anchorman as data activators, if you combine those three, then you have the domain knowledge from Laurent, the generic solution thinking from me, and the knowledge and experience of the data engineers and data scientists also at our company. And if you put those three together, then you can create an awesome generic configurable solution that's been aimed at solving business questions and delivering business values in the MRO domain, because we added the business knowledge from the specific MRO business knowledge from Laurent. And we did that in a few steps. What we talked about is the great diversity of data systems, administrations that are all stuck with their own data standard. We pull the data out and put it in our solution. And then we have our matching machine, our matching engine, and we take bulk matching.
Matching, it sounds like a dating site.
It's quantum, baby. It's magic.
These two bearings are the same. Okay, let's match them up. That's what you do.
Yeah, but that's what it is. If you look at the specifics of a physical part, then you can quite easily say if those parts are the same.
Yeah.
Especially when you have a description of...
So actually, that's funny because
and what we did is translate that knowledge into our solution and be able to, over millions of items that are administrated in ERP master data, in procurement data, in stock data, to put that together and find all the similarities and say these items, these different elements in all those data sets are actually the same. Yeah. So then you can answer questions like, how much of these items did we buy? How often did we buy them? Where did we bought them?
What
if
price?
we want to do a tender in France, which suppliers have I used to procure these parts, and who should I ask? I want to do contract negotiations. But also in a factory, if you want to say, I want to find my spare part, and I have some characteristics, what we saw at one of our customers is that they have an internal community. If you're looking for a part, then you ask your community with a picture or just some text, I'm looking for this part, can somebody help me? How much more easy would it be if you can go to just an app and do the find my spare part over all the data in all the organization, and then find the spare part that you are needing.
Wow.
And the funny thing was also when you were talking about how did you get to the solution. So you first you make an algorithm of things that I did before, but then when it started coming back to me, then it became really fun to work on it, because my knowledge, my intelligence was limited to what I could do in Excels and etc. But now I saw that more was possible. So we started to add all kinds of challenges. Well, if you can do that, can you do this as well? And can you do this as well? So the current algorithms that we have are a million times smarter than what I did 4 or 5 years ago to find something.
Yeah, because they make themselves smarter in the end.
We're on an AI journey, right?
Now we're moving slowly into machine learning and AI.
Well, come on, the title of this series is the AI journey, so that's sounds like a journey to me.
AI is not the silver bullet.
No.
AI can help you, and we can do a lot of things with AI, but we could not have done it without, I mentioned our matching engine, I mentioned the domain knowledge. It's what we have several types of matching ways of matching in our matching engine, and the first and which one you can do without is what we call bulk matching, but it's rule-based matching based on domain knowledge, based on looking at the data by Laurent and see what's in there and creating kind of rules to apply to that data and to get what they call labeled data that is needed to train, to create and train a model. But and that's what we did. We went from bulk matching to what we call deep matching, and that's where AI comes in. That's where algorithms come in, because we went from the bulk matching to the deep matching by stepping from rules to algorithms, and then to a machine learning model.
Yeah.
And the last, and that's what's great about machine learning models, they can learn, but they learn based on input, and that's what we call crowd matching, where you can have users looking at the results of what comes out of the matching, bulk matching and machine learning matching, and then provide feedback to the model and make it better by retraining it with the feedback that's coming from the experts actually in the organization.
Yeah. Yeah, assume all these people are listening from the supply chain procurement department and think, wow, that sounds really nice. But they have to go to management to convince these people.
And there's the problem. I mean, in management, people still think you get a couple of nerds in, and they are brilliant. They come up with 2 algorithms and they solve the whole problem, fixed within a week. Well, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, okay.
It's like building
for sure, you need to be able to show them benefits.
Foundation.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. But you need to be able to show them benefits, literally.
Well,
where's the money? Show me the money.
we talked about we did not talk about it, but we called tail spend management, supplier management. Find my spare part. If you have downtime and you can find a spare part fast, then you have less downtime.
Which
and
makes
then
sense.
You save money by not having downtime in your factory. Yeah. So that's operational efficiency. But also
leveraging spend by knowing exactly what I've seen large organizations, quite well structured, who had no idea how many ball bearings they were buying all over the world. Now, I mean, there's just a couple of manufacturers. If you have that figure, because in their case it was large enough, if you have that figure, well, you can talk to them all and say, okay, make a bid on this. This is the world business. Come up with something. Now a procurement department can actually do its work because it has the data. And before they didn't have the data and they couldn't do their work.
Okay. And to that, if you know how much you buy at which supplier, then every time you buy it, you have overhead of the order line that needs to be managed. If you can reduce the order lines by 50%, you have 50% less overhead. We talked to a customer. They had a huge pile of stock, and they do not know what it is. So they have in the books about 40 million worth of stock, and they have to calculate a certain percentage of that every year and put it in their books and write it off, and it's costing them millions per year.
So there's saving potentials there. Yeah, that could add up to a business case for sure. Yeah, nice. But I have some 2 interesting questions still before we have to wrap it up.
Already?
Given the time. Yeah, time is flying when you're having fun, guys. I'm sorry for that, even in our case. So in your opinion, guys, and try to respond to this briefly, please. What are the typical symptoms that supply chain or procurement can have when they're they disconnect later on, and then they say, okay, let's look at my own world of MRO in my own company, and I see these kind of symptoms that might be leading to what Benno and Laurent have been suggesting in this podcast.
Go into your production. Go to the workstations of your engineers and see if they have their own private stockpiles of spare parts.
So they keep a shadow list. That's what you're saying?
The physical own spare parts. If you find that, you're in trouble, and you're in more trouble than you know.
Okay. Okay. How about that for a symptom?
Well, trust me, I challenge most companies. Let me go to your production. I will find the gray stock. It is used. It has a name. Okay. So it's not like something that I've once seen somewhere. No, it's a common thing. And if you have gray stock, you have an MRO problem.
All right. Okay, that's clear. And from the technical side of you, the data side, Benno, what are symptoms that procurement or supply chain can tell? Perhaps we have opportunities here.
Well, it always starts, of course, from the business side. If you have a large supplier base and you want to manage the supplier base and you have multiple administrations, and then how are you gonna get scale utilization? If that's something you're wondering about, then you might have a problem, and we can help you. Right. Also on the supply chain side, if you're coping with master data management, if you need to do data cleansing, if you want to optimize your stock, your non-moving stock, your slow-moving stock.
Because there are also issues that
those are questions you're wondering about how to do it, we can help you.
Yeah, okay, so you're solving these issues on the same go as well, the data quality and master data kind of thing regarding these spare parts, for instance.
Yeah, well, the nice thing about our platform is that it's configurable. It's built up out of components, and we can put it in we can deliver it in different models. So we can, if you have only have a specific procurement challenge, we can help you with our platform with a tool aimed at procurement. But we can also provide you with a tool aimed at supply chain. So if you want to have a data cleansing tool, we can configure it to be a data cleansing tool. If you want to have the find my spare part function because you want to have insight on the work floor where the spare part that you are in need of is, then you can just have the find my spare part tool.
Every time Benno and I sit together, we figure out at least 3 new use cases. So that's
so there are plenty of opportunities out there. Okay.
Yeah, once you've got the basic problems fixed and it works, then it's just your fantasy on what can I do with that.
Okay. Cool. Hey, well, we started off with a bit of history, the road from supply chain procurement up to this data kind of point. Let's end this nice one with some future descriptions. How is very briefly the future of these kind of challenges? So supply chain procurement and MRO regarding data. How does this look like? How does the future look like?
Bright, man, very bright.
What was in your coffee?
It's all gonna be okay in the end. No, you have to think outside the box of the silos that you're in the data silo, in the organizational department silo, in the ERP silo, and think about the possibilities that you have and embrace them. And looking at what we are doing now with our solution, we're moving more and more towards the data science part and improving our machine learning model, and now looking into graph theory, which is quite awesome to see if you have a spare part. We have spare parts of thousands of items, and those are master data items, supplier data items, and also procurement items, so items you ordered. So it's a bunch of items all matched together, making up a spare part, and then you can use graph theory.
You should start a Tinder spare part app. I think that's a gold, because there's gold in there, man.
If you can put it in a graph, then you get those holistic images with clusters of items and lines between them, where the nodes in there are the items and the lines are the matches, and then you can see how items in a spare part are matched together. In the end, the basic administration that led up to this point is a human entering information in a system. Yep. And he does it by using his own words, by using his own language. So you can. That's one of the problems, that a human just has to quickly enter something, and you don't know what it is. And later on, if you have matched it together, then you can get a great graph of information, and you can zoom in, and you can ask geographical questions, but also ask supplier-related questions.
Oh, so the future looks very insightful. That's what you're actually saying.
It's very insightful, and as from the user point of view, the future looks like fast efficiency gains with modern technology in the short term, to linking it up with predictive maintenance And now you know what's in the machine, and you know when your engineers are available, and you know when the machine needs maintenance. So all that can be planned now by a system instead of people doing all that.
Okay.
Why should you have a procurement department if the machine can order it? Because we know what it is.
Yep.
So that's longer term, and in the very long term, actually, what I see is that your stock is digital.
Right.
I mean, in future, school kids will be having a tour of big warehouses that we have now, and they'll be like, "Wow, these people just put parts in here, just on the off chance that they might actually need them." That's stupid.
That's actually stupid. Yeah. Well, if you put it like this, it really sounds a bit silly, to be honest. Yeah.
So,
all right.
That's the long term.
Yeah. Nice. Thanks for this, guys. So the future, to wrap it up, is looking data driven, also for the more traditional supply chain and procurement divisions within companies, big or small. Yeah. And also, I think both of you are concluding that the future is already here. So we can start using this today. Yeah. Good. Well, thanks a zillion, guys. Also to the audience out there, thanks for listening. In which way device you have been doing that, Spotify or whatever. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, Laurent and Rijn Benno, at this podcast. And we'll meet you again at the next journey of artificial intelligence at Anchorman. See you.
Thanks, man. You're welcome.
Did we inspire you? Tune in for the next episodes. Or visit our website, anchorman.nl. There you'll find more on bootcamps, AI masterclasses, or careers. See you at the next episode.